Welcome to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the changes and challenges we face and the great things that people are doing to make Greater Portland a fantastic place to live, work, and play. I'm Kristina Egan, your host. Today we have a special episode. We're here with two of the mayoral candidates in Portland, Mark Dion and Pugh. We are going to talk to them about the future of Portland, their vision for it, and how Portland fits into the region. I'm very glad to have both of you. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks.
Great to have you. And welcome, Dylan.
Thanks, Christine. It's great to be here.
You two have been doing a lot of structured debates, so we talked before the show about making this a little bit more conversational. I'm still going to try to make sure that there's about equal airtime for each of you, and I ask each of you to do the same for one another and be respectful. I've been impressed so far watching the mayoral candidates interact. It's been very civil, very fair, and we want to continue that on today's show. And we're going to dive right in to some questions. And Mark, I'm going to start with you. Why did you want to run for mayor?
I love this city. I've spent my entire adult life here in Portland, first on the police department, then as a sheriff, as a state rep and a senator. I've spent all that time trying to advocate for the best interests of this city. And somewhere along the line, I became a lawyer, and then I made a decision to run for city council. And I respect the responsibility people gave me when they put me in that chair. And today I want to run for mayor because I want to provide the leadership to the council and to the city as a whole as to where we might go in the future and how we might achieve that.
Thank you. And how about you, Dylan? What's your reason?
Yeah, for me, it's really personal. Portland is really the first place I've called home in my life. I could have a unstable upbringing, and Portland really embraced me through some difficult times in my life. And as I lived in Portland, I really saw the community changing a lot, and I wanted to be sure that it would remain a place that people could get the help that they need. I felt that I was really lucky to come here and find a community. And what I also started to see is that there are so many amazingly talented and passionate and dedicated people in Portland working to try to make the city a better place. But it felt to me like there was some problem translating their effort into real results. So I wanted to see what are the blockers that we're looking at a structural level in our political process. And because the city helped me so much, I wanted to help the people that are already here and really working to make it better.
And as you've been out talking to people, Dylan, what are some of the issues that are top of mind for those folks?
The number one thing I hear from everybody is affordable housing.
Yeah.
It is
not a shocker.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And how about for you, Mark? What are you hearing?
The two top things, one is safety. There's a sense that our collective community safety has declined. And that gets described from a variety of perspectives. But simply put, we don't feel safe. We don't feel that Portland is the same city it was a few years ago, that our collective sense of how we move about the city has been challenged. And then on the housing piece, I think everyone's talking about that. But there's a variety of opinions. Some elders will say, I want to stay in my home. Some property owners say, I'd like to serve more tenants, but there are restrictions and challenges that I can't meet in serving that clientele and maintaining my property. There's tenants, and actually we're a city of tenants, who feel the anxiety of not knowing whether or not they can keep pace with inflationary pressures and remain in their apartment. I mean, I get calls as a lawyer, look, I think they're trying to evict me. I mean, that's a terrible place to be.
Yeah, feels very insecure.
So I think those are the two top ones. I mean, there are other issues, if you probe a little bit, they're willing to discuss, but I think safety and affordability, I'll sum it up that way, are the two themes. And go ahead.
Dylan, does that resonate for you, the safety and kind of that texture that Mark provided on the different constituencies in the city that are talking about housing in different ways?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I've been hearing as well. And I think the safety is absolutely tied into housing for people. I mean, you look at the situation we have with homeless encampments and the unhoused population, a lot of people feel like they're not too far away from that. So if you don't feel secure and safe in your home, that impacts every other element of your life, and it really prohibits you from interacting in the city in a way that you should be able to.
We're going to spend some time hearing a little bit about your thoughts, both of your thoughts, about some of the solutions to the housing shortage and also what's happening in the encampments. But I know you've been talking a lot about those. So I'm going to start with a bit of a bigger picture. Portland is the economic driver for the region that the Greater Portland Council of Governments serves. And we also know that Portland depends on the rest of the region, from clean water from Sebago Lake to workers who come into Portland. What is your understanding of Portland's role in the region and how important it is for Portland to play kind of a role in working with its neighbors? Dylan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the number one thing is leadership. I think Portland is absolutely the leader in not just the region, but the state. And I think that we are also the nexus of so many of these issues that we're seeing sort of manifest in Portland. And they're manifesting not just because of conditions in Maine, but they're national and they're international issues. You think about climate change, climate-driven migration, a lack of affordable housing nationwide. So what we're seeing in Portland is really outsized compared to the size of the community, but it's here regardless. And what I really want us to see is Portland be a local leader and a national leader about how do you solve these issues. And I use that word solve deliberately because I don't think we should be in the process of just mitigating or just reducing harm a little bit. I think help is not going to come from the federal government. Maybe that's cynical for me to say, but Portland needs to lead the way in how do you actually make structural changes to address these systems in the long term so that we're not here again, 20, 30 years down the line having the same conversation about housing, same conversation about economic insecurity.
And Dylan, do you see a role for you, if you're elected mayor, to working with the other communities? I mean, you talked about Portland as a leader, but how about as a partner?
Absolutely. I think starting with that leadership position, but the next thing is partnership with the regional, with the region. And I think the important thing to know about that is that Portland absolutely cannot do this alone. I think Portland has to lead the way and set the tone, but we have to have really close partnerships with Westbrook, South Portland, Scarborough, these places, and we have to be unified in our approach to these issues. Because one thing, for instance, if we're thinking about how do we ask more of the big corporations that are operating in Portland, for instance, and if Portland were, for instance, to pass an ordinance where we would tax those entities more heavily, which I would like to see, we can't have a situation in which they say, oh, well, I'll just go to South Portland. Oh, I'll just go to Westbrook. So we have to have a unified regional approach where we're aligned on our values and we're open to trying out some new and bold ideas to improve the region as a whole.
Thank you. Mark, what's your perspective about Portland's role in the region?
Our greatest strength is our economic position. Our greatest weakness is misunderstanding what that means. I see Portland as having a responsibility to be predictable and consistent when it makes policy. I think it's incumbent on the mayor to reflect that if we set a trend or a direction, what consequence it has on the metro region as well. Because if we're undertaking a question and providing an answer, we can almost expect it's going to get regenerated in councils across the metro.
Can you make that a little concrete for the folks that are listening? What do you mean by that?
Well, look, if we decide how we would manage property, okay, in terms of its development, or what we do with recoding our zoning ordinances, it's going to send a marker to the other communities about how they might want to consider that, or they're going to be challenged. Well, Portland did it, why don't we do it? We could have a tendency as a city to roll over everyone else's unique characteristic as a community by virtue of our decisions. Mm-hmm. There's an assumption, and sometimes we feel good about that as Portland, but I hearken back to when I was sheriff. I had to serve all 28 communities in the county, and I came to appreciate the worldview that different communities in the county have of themselves, of Portland, how we should move together, as Dylan referred to, in partnership. So I think we need to have a very intentional partnership. We don't want to come in and dominate. We have to be almost a servant leader to the other communities. I mean, that would be the approach I take, and I serve right now on GPCOG's executive committee, and I appreciate all the perspectives, and we assume there's certain impacts when state laws are passed on us, but I think it's healthy to consider how that might impact others, especially if we're trying to solve a common problem. So it's, I think it's a tight wire to walk, to be leading the city, but being truly humble in that leadership to appreciate it's just as tough to lead some of these other towns. So I would not come to that table assuming I have the answer. Just follow me, ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm there to have an honest conversation about what our collective experience and direction should be.
We had an experience at the GBCOG table where the current mayor of South Portland actually was the one who catalyzed the Host Homes program, which back in 2019 to help asylum seekers get with different folks. And it was a regional table that kind of came up with that, which was great. Dylan, I want to stay on this idea of the region for a moment. And as mayor, what would be some of the issues that you would want to actively participate in the region in order to try to solve some of those common problems that Mark was referring to?
Absolutely. I think it comes right back down to what I'm hearing from people in Portland when I'm out talking to people, and that's the affordable housing issue, economic security, and then dealing with the issues of homelessness. And I think they're all really connected, and I think the common thread through them is this idea of powerlessness. People don't feel empowered to stay in their home. People don't feel that they're making enough money or they have enough democracy in their workplace that they can make autonomous decisions there. And if you look at the issue of homelessness, people feel powerless on both sides. They feel powerless in the face of these encampments that are having a really, really negative effect on their business or their home. But obviously, people that are unhoused feel totally powerless to interact with the city and the region very often. And I think one of the things that we need to do on a regional level is have a unified approach to that, because it's not really realistic for us in Portland to be the only host and the only service provider for people that are experiencing homelessness or for asylum seekers.
Are there what would you do as mayor to try to work with other communities on homelessness and asylum seekers?
Absolutely. I think the first thing that we need is a unified data approach. We need to understand how many people are out there unsheltered right now. What are their names? What are the issues they're dealing with? And what kind of services do they need? In
Portland or throughout the region?
Absolutely throughout the region.
Throughout the region.
Yeah, this needs to be a regional effort because we need to make sure that if somebody can't find affordable housing in Portland, for instance, it's still our responsibility to make sure they can find it somewhere else. And this doesn't need to be, this should be absolutely a collaborative issue. So I would be on the phone with the mayor of Westbrook, the mayor of South Portland, all the time discussing, hey, we have some people that need some help. What can we do with your community? What can you do for our community? So I think that having that ongoing conversation in a really, positive, collaborative way is absolutely essential. I would want to avoid any animosity between the communities.
And Mark, for you, what are the regional issues that you'd want to really dive into as mayor?
I don't disagree with, homelessness, of course, housing in particular. It's tough. I think once you appreciate what a community is. Scarborough is different from Westbrook, is different from Gorham, is different from Bridgeton. I think there's a certain candor that has to occur among the municipalities to say, what are we good at? And then ask each other to make that contribution. I mean, housing, the unhoused, if I could get more transportation resources or some specialty staff to do some case management, and we did that as a collaborative, that would be helpful. I mean, it's easy to say I wish Scarborough would build more, Gorham build more. Those are decisions for home in their own homes. But I think there are hard assets that they could bring to the question as to whether or not housing should just be defined by Portland. I think it has to be defined collaboratively. And I'll give you a quick example. Decades ago, we were struggling about drug enforcement. We didn't know how to do it, and we were all comfortable in our little silos and probably not particularly effective. And then through the leadership of certain individuals, we created a cooperative agency where everybody contributed resources and they were centralized and dispatched accordingly, and we got better at our job. And I think we have to look for a similar process and a structure to do that in terms of housing. I mean,
our communities have done this before, on waste management. Yeah. The communities banded together and created Eco Maine. So there's precedent for these solutions to be generated regionally. I want to go into some specific issues now and ask for each of you to kind of lay out what your vision and your priorities are in a couple different issue areas. They all connect, of course, but we'll start with transportation. And Mark, I'd like to start with you. What do you see as the future of like a good direction for Portland to go as it thinks about transportation investments? And are there some priority projects or priority initiatives that you would have as mayor?
Is this a wish list or a practical list?
Practical. Okay. Let's be practical.
Okay, to be practical, we have to get all in behind Metro and similar resources. I looked at some data. 87% of the ridership for our bus service are individuals who have really no connection to automobiles to begin with.
Yep.
So we're preaching to the choir. I think we could serve the choir better, but I want to see if by modifying routes, increasing speed between times of pickup, that we can't solicit people who have cars to leave them home. I tell a story. Between jobs, I didn't have a car, and I live in a very suburban part of the city, and I stood at the bus stop. I can't tell you how many people pulled over and said, "Hey, you okay?" And I go, "What's the matter? You need a ride?" I go, "I am taking a ride. It's called a bus." But there was such a cultural lens about you have to have a car to live in Deering. But when I look at the bus schedule, it's really hard to navigate the kind of movement you have to do in the city. So we need to do more there. I want to see data that says 50% is now people who had cars. You know, they're competing with those who have no cars to get on a bus. So better routes, faster service, and an intentional campaign to disconnect from automobiles. And the last thing I want, which is more in the vision stage, but we can start laying the groundwork, is light rail going north and west.
Okay.
I love Boston. I'm always jealous of the T. If only we had been.
It's not doing so great right now, but it is a system that really moves a lot of people.
But it's a very egalitarian transportation system.
Yeah.
Everyone from all walks of life.
That's right.
And economic station make great use of that service. And that, to me, that's a benchmark that we should evaluate projects with.
Dylan, how about you? What's your transportation vision and priority for Portland?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with Mark. I think those are all great ideas. I would love to see a light rail. It'd be excellent. For me, I think the other element is multimodal transportation. So
what does multimodal mean?
Well, I know. Sorry, I've been kind of in the policy brain recently, using the slang. So that's transportation that's not car-centric. So it could be public transportation, walking, cycling, and things like that. So trying to empower people that want to bike or want to walk to be able to use that as their main mode of transportation. I also live up north in Darien, and I biked for about a year when I first got to Portland, and it was tough, honestly, biking down Warren.
It's a little scary out there.
It's a little, and I think that's the number one thing that I hear from people is that the element of safety comes back. People would love to bike. It's a really great way to commute. It's a great way to connect with the community, but they feel super unsafe on the roads. So I think the thing that we can do is we can create favorable conditions for that through our zoning approach and being really deliberate to say, most American cities have been made to be very car-centric over, several decades here. How do we reverse that and make it more bike-centric, more pedestrian-centric?
Well, can I just jump in on that?
Sure.
Just for context, in the last 8 years, the city's Department of Public Works has adopted as a mission to enhance and expand capacity for cyclists. So whenever they redesign a road or do new surface reconstruction, you'll see that they accommodate more bicycles. I mean, my vision, yes, I want to see more bicycles. I'd like to see Congress Street congested with pedestrians. I mean, that would be I remember days that used to be the case. That's gone away. But I suspect the bus and walking were the drivers behind that presence. So if we can get there, that's great. But I just want to put it out there, Dylan, is that the city had other leaders that precede you and I understood that challenge, and DPW just quietly goes out there and gets it done. I mean, to be quite honest, it's kind of dangerous to drive a car around here sometimes, never mind being on a bicycle.
Right.
For those of you who are just tuning in, you're listening to Let's Connect Greater Portland, a show about the issues we face in Greater Portland and the movers and shakers. I've got two of them here, the movers and shakers that are leading the way. I've got Mark Dion and Dylan Pugh, who are candidates to be mayor in Portland. And I'm going to segue. Both of you talked about the importance of public transportation, walking and biking. On the transportation front, those are climate solutions also. And I would like to hear a little bit about your vision for what Portland needs to do to prepare for the climate change that we're experiencing right now, and also what it needs to do its part to reduce the emissions that are contributing to climate change. Dylan, I'll start with you, and then Mark will go to you. And we are getting close to the end of the show, so I'm going to ask you to be as succinct as you can be.
I'll try to be brief on what is a huge topic, obviously. Thank you for your framing, because there are two parts to the climate question: prevention and mitigation. And as you said, we are already into the mitigation phase. You walk down on Commercial Street, Wrights Wharf, Union Wharf, these places are starting to be underwater during king tide. I work at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. I work with this data every single day. And mitigation has to be the name of the game for us immediately. We can't wait on this for a day. So we need to do a municipal vulnerability assessment to see what parts of our critical infrastructure are going to be underwater, which parts are going to be impacted, and who are the business owners, who are the stakeholders involved in these things, and how do we help them transition their infrastructure to a way that's resilient, or move if necessary, hopefully not. And on the prevention side, I think electrification is the name of the game. We have an enormous opportunity to do a large push for solar, rooftop solar, municipal solar, and I think that the more we can transition to that, the better off we're going to be. And I think you're right that encouraging people to move away from single-use automobiles is also a big part of it. But I think the city needs to be a leader in the electrification movement here.
Mark, your thoughts?
I think the public is moving faster than the government, and that's okay. Those are market forces that I think will get us the results we collectively agree on. As I said in the debate the other night, I want to start small. I'd rather get small things done first to develop capacity to take on bigger challenges. And I really want this to be the forest city again.
The forest city.
Yeah. I want more trees. It's not high technology, but it's the right kind of natural resource investment we should make for the city. And there were two areas that I wanted to address, and Dylan, I know, shares one of them with me, is Commercial Street is going to get flooded, has been getting flooded cyclically. So I want to explore what we can do, seawalls or retaining structures, to protect the investments that have been made on Commercial Street. And one of my personal favorites is Back Cove. That is our center jewel. And I want to make sure it's here for the next generation. And I'm really concerned about what's happening in the harbor itself. So that's a long way of saying I'll pay particular attention to the Casco Bay watershed. I think one of the key resources of Maine is the quality of our water.
It's like the best.
So to me, it's they talk green sometimes. I like to talk blue. Okay, blue is real important to me because I think it's a fundamental expectation of our residents that we have clean water, that we have a harbor that still has value for a variety of reasons, and we protect our lakes and rivers that abut the city.
Dylan, earlier in the show, you said climate migration, which is recently starting to be on the top of people's minds, which means that people who are experiencing stresses or extreme weather in other parts of the country or even parts of the world could be moving to a more climate-safe place, which Maine is among. Can you tell us what you would do on housing to be able to try to prepare for folks that might arrive, as well as take care of those right now who are finding it really difficult to rent and to buy in this very tight market?
Absolutely. I think we absolutely have to expect climate migration. I'm very, very thankful to live in Maine. I'm also a little nervous about how many other people are going to figure that out pretty soon and be on their way. And as much as we need to welcome people, we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure to support large influxes of people. So for me, the name of the game with housing is we talk a lot about supply. So obviously we need to build more. We need to make favorable zoning conditions. But the other element of this that I don't want to miss is changing the ownership structure and changing the power structure behind housing, because you don't want to just build a lot more, but preserve the existing power structures that promote inequality and promote this feeling that people have of being very financially tenuous. Maybe they have an apartment that they can rent, but maybe somebody from California is moving up and can offer more for rent. The fundamental issue is that people don't have control over their own housing destinies, if you will. And as you have an influx of people, that's going to be more and more critical, because people will often feel like we're competing for a limited number of resources. And that has an enormous impact on things down the line as far as social cohesion, as far as impacts on the democratic process. So what we need to do is make a model for the region and the nation is how can we massively boost home ownership rates and boost people's security?
And how can we?
So I think that we have to be really creative with creating favorable financial conditions. So I think we should create a pathway. The city should create this so that people that are living in a large apartment building can convert that to a co-op and then buy their apartments with their neighbors. So something that might have been owned by one company then becomes collectively owned from people.
Okay. And Mark, how about you? What are your thoughts on how we boost housing options for people that are here and are coming?
Well, I think people will continue to come here, so that's a condition, not a crisis. Sometimes I oversimplify things, but
Go for it. We're at the end of the show.
I think we have to come to terms with the idea of density. All right? How we build is important. How we finance it is critical, but some of those elements are outside our control as a mayor. But we do have the ability to lead on the idea of answering the question of density. Mm-hmm. How many units and what kind of space? So to do that, it's the mechanical re-engineering of our zoning code. Mm-hmm. We have to look at that. And
you are through Recode right now. Do you feel like that's a sufficient approach? We did a whole show with Nell
right.
and
they love
Christine
it.
about
I'll
it.
put it this way.
Yeah.
Planning loves it. Okay, great. Because they're the technocrats. Well, I represent the people, and the people want a process where they see this as a bottoms-up approach that we're going to be I will be very clear as mayor that they have a legitimacy in saying neighborhoods count. So how do we incorporate neighborhood expectations into this idea that we have to make more units available? So it's not going to be easy. It's like world peace. No one's against it. But when you get down in the details, it's a challenge. But I think as we move forward over the next 5 to 10 years, how we answer the density question will unravel our capacity to resolve homelessness.
So I'm going to end with a rapid fire here, which means a quick answer. If you were mayor, what are the top 2 changes that you want to accomplish for Portland? Who wants to go first?
So I can go. The top 2 changes?
Yeah, quickly.
It's absolutely about that housing stability and making conditions for homelessness, making conditions where homelessness cannot exist, where it's structurally impossible for that to happen.
Mark?
Permitting. So we can get out of the way and allow people who want to build in a timeline that makes it affordable for the construction. If construction is not affordable, we don't get affordable units. I think that's a key piece to have to be addressed right away.
Mark, Dion, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
And Dylan Pugh, thank you so much. It's been great to get to know you.
So it's great to be here. Thank you.
And I also want to thank Joshua, who's our sound engineer, and WMPG, who collaborates with the Greater Portland Council of Governments in producing this show. You can reach us on Instagram at Let's Connect Radio. Join us next week for another conversation about the great work that's happening in our communities. Until then, be kind to yourself and to each other. I'm Kristina Egan. See you next time on Let's Connect Greater Portland.